Alright, my plan is for this to be a quick video. Do I have 2 other long form videos that are halfway finished and I should probably be doing right now? Yes. Am I going to do that? No. But I had an idea, it should be a quick video and we're going to run with it. Like in most hobbies, in guitar and music in general, there are things that cost a lot of money, and when you put together a rig of all of them, it ends up being an eye-watering amount of money. And every company, YouTuber, big artist, and even your buddies are just going to tell you that you need to suck it up and invest in quality gear. Which certainly sometimes is the case. I have had a couple of shows come to a screeching halt because a patch cable went out that was cheap, and I probably should have bought a better version of the patch cable, but at the time I just didn't feel like paying a lot of money for, you know, a patch cable. I've since learned that a patch cable is not something you should cheap out on. But in my opinion, I have learned there are a couple pieces of gear that you can cheap out on and it not impact your tone or reliability that much. And you know, you save $20 here, $30 there. It'll all add up to where hopefully you have a little bit more money to put towards the pieces that do matter. All right, so we'll get the boring housekeeping out of the way. No one is sponsoring this video. None of these companies have paid me to make this. Why would they? I'm going to tell you that you need to cheap out on this stuff, and all of these opinions are my own. This list is also mainly for like mid-tier guitarists and musicians, kind of where I am. So like, you're not exclusively playing in your bedroom, but also you're not a signed touring act, like you're doing gigs regularly in your area. That's gonna kind of be the sweet spot here. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get to the 5 pieces of gear that I think that you can cheap out on. Number 1, your pedal board. Oh, I gotta grab a pedal board, oh my goodness. No, that's dumb. Do I have the one over here? I might. I forgot where my pedal board was. Now, no, I don't mean the entire pedal board. I mean the physical thing that you put pedals on. Your pedal board, while it can serve more purposes, really just needs to do 2 things. 1, hold your pedals, and 2, not collapse under your weight when you step on it. And to meet those 2 conditions, you basically just have to have a pedal board made out of metal. That's pretty much it. Now, I have a lot of high quality pedal boards. This is a Morton modular board. I really like those. I have pedal trains. I have a pedal pad. But at the end of the day, if you go on Amazon and get an aluminum pedal board for about half the price or less of what these companies charge, you will be totally fine. You can put Velcro or dual lock on them. They'll both work. They will hold your pedals just fine. And assuming they're made out of aluminum or another type of metal, they shouldn't crush under your weight. Literally the only thing I would avoid is like a plastic pedal board, but I don't even know if I've seen plastic pedal board. As a matter of fact, Matt, the bass player for the trio, has been playing an Amazon board for pretty much the entire time we've been playing out, and hasn't cracked, hasn't had anything happen to it. It's not even rusting, I don't think. It's still going to shows and playing just fine. The second thing that I think you can cheap out on are gear cases. Now, if you've played out a couple places or watched a bunch of YouTube videos, you have probably seen these style of cases that a lot of musicians use. Some famous brands that make them include Pelican and Nanook. Nanook? I don't know, it's a Canadian company, and my Florida Panthers beat Canada every year in hockey, the only sport they care about, so. Do you really want something from Canada? I'm sorry, Canadians, I love you. Cases are very expensive. I mean, like a standard size Pelican case is like over $150. I think their little one on rolly wheels is like 300 something. I mean, they're kind of insane. So for this one, I have a very specific suggestion, and that's to go down to your local Harbor Freight and pick up an Apache series case. Now, the Apache series cases are basically the same thing. They're made out of hard plastic. They have these latches on them. They got a handle on them. They open, they have a seal. I've taken mine out, but they have like the pull and pluck foam that you can use. So if you're really into your stuff looking real slick in here, you can still do that. They technically have a little water seal thing to them, although I wouldn't throw anything from Harbor Freight in a river or anything and expect it to survive. But for what you're gonna need it for, it's going to do the job just fine. Now, Harbor Freight throws things on sale all the time, but I will tell you, typically this will run you like 30 or 40 bucks. I think the big one on wheels that I have was like 100, maybe 120. So these are like quite literally a third of what the big names are charging. And again, if you don't plan on running over this with a truck or anything, you're probably gonna be just fine. Now, I use mine for all kinds of things. I put my pedal boards in these that I don't wanna use the soft case for. I put cables and such in here. I have an entire emergency kit that I always bring with me that is in an Apache case. You can check out that video here somewhere. And if you don't have a Harbor Freight near you, I believe Amazon has a brand or a couple different brands that are kind of the same idea where they're built basically the same, just they're much much cheaper. Do you get a warranty? No, but you know what? I've heard Pelican isn't great at honoring the warranty anyway. So the third thing I think you can cheap out on are utility pedals. These are pedals like tuners, AB boxes, anything that just kind of does a technical job but doesn't affect the tone. You don't need to be spending more than like $100 on these things. Get yourself a used Boss TU3 tuner for like $50. You will probably have that for the rest of your life. You will probably be able to give that to your grandchildren and they will be tuning their guitars with it. You do not need a fancy $200 tuner that displays pictures on it or gets you to the umpteenth cent or whatever of tuning. If you're really struggling and trying to scrape together as much money as you can, anything that is utility, you can probably just jump on Amazon, buy an off-brand of it, and it should work fine. Now there is a little caveat on this one. You probably don't want to go ultra cheap because if it is made out of plastic or if it isn't wired correctly, then you could get some noise or you could crack it or anything like that. But really at the end of the day, most anything that's going to be, I don't know, over $30 should hold you over just fine. Number 4 is guitar adjacent, but I think a lot of guitar players either have them or should have them, and that is an audio interface. So for those unfamiliar, an audio interface is the device that allows you to plug your guitar or a microphone into it and then connect it to a computer so that you can record, use amp sims, all that kind of stuff. Now, if we were 10 to 20 years ago, I wouldn't recommend this as a cheap thing that you do because you probably would have had issues, the drivers wouldn't have worked, some of them didn't sound good, there was a lot of quality issues and the technology just wasn't quite there. However, we live in modern times and that's where you can spend about $100 on an audio interface and it sounds almost indistinguishable from one that's $1,000. Now, I probably made a lot of audio tech nerds mad, and I'm sorry, I will admit the $1,000 one is going to sound better than the $100 one, but when it comes to just plugging your guitar in and being able to use an amp sim or lay down a recording or something like that, they all record in pretty high fidelity recordings that you will be able to use on just about anything. There are a lot of major artists that bring very small, compact audio interfaces that are only a couple $100 on the road and end up using some of that stuff on their records. So if you are looking for one of these, I think it is totally fine just to get a Focusrite Scarlett or a Presonus Audio Box Go or Fender Studio, whatever. I don't know, they bought each other and something happened with the names. I don't know what happened. Anyways, I'll put it on the screen now. But you can feel free to buy something cheap and it should work. Most of the time on a Mac, it just works. On a PC, you install a driver and it'll work fine. And typically there's so much post-processing on the back end anyways, you will never know the difference of if it was recorded with a $100 audio interface or a $10,000 one. And the fifth and last thing that I recommend that you cheap out on is a practice amp. Why? Because we're talking about practice. Now for a lot of you, especially if you're in the budget conscious area, you may be saying, well, I only own one amp and I can only afford one amp and my main amp is my practice amp, and that's totally fine. That actually is probably the most budget way to go here. But if you do own a bigger amp or a tube amp or something that's just not super practical to practice around the house with, especially if you have neighbors or family, then you may need an amp that is smaller, has a headphone out or something like that. And in this case, again, because you're practicing, I would highly recommend you just get a used Line 6 Spider or Fender Frontman 25 and practice with one of those. You may even have a buddy that has one that will give one to you. These amps are very unpopular, mainly because they don't sound great.
Insane, so here we go.
But you don't need great tone, you just need to hear yourself. Another bonus option here is just using your audio interface that I mentioned in the last one to use an amp sim to practice with, and then you're good. You don't even have to buy anything else. If you're already recording demos or using your computer, you can just use that for practice and plug your headphones in or turn your computer monitors down. I say all this with my fancy Boss Katana practice amp back here. Now to close, I know I may seem like a hypocrite. I know I have a lot of fancy gear if you watch the channel, but this video is mainly for if you are budget conscious and you're trying to put something together within certain budget constraints. I'd really hate for you to take $50 away from what you would spend on patch cables and put it towards something like a Pelican case or a pedal board that's fancier, when at the end of the day, the bad patch cable is what's actually going to stop the show when you're playing live. And of course, as always, if you have other things that you think you can cheap out on or you disagree with anything that I've said, leave it down in the comments. More than happy to discuss down there. Like, subscribe, do all that kind of stuff. I'll catch you guys later.